Hello lads, ladies, gents, ladetts, whoever, whatever, welcome back to another video. Coming from a time of many cult classics, none might be considered more so than today's game, Panzer Dragoon. This on-rail shooter from developers Team Andromeda released way back in 1995 for the Sega Saturn, in which sadly, at least here in Australia, the Saturn never really seemed to catch on, as it was more about Nintendo and the PlayStation when it came to the console scene. Ultimately, because the Saturn never really did catch on globally, it has become somewhat of a goldmine for hidden gems in classics that many people have either never played or heard of. Thanks to its dedicated fanbase, we did eventually get a remaster of Panzer Dragoon, and it's playable on all modern consoles. And all I can say is I am incredibly thankful for this fanbase, because the second-hand market can be a little bit on the pricey side. Not the worst I've ever seen, but I do appreciate being able to pick it up for a few bucks instead. So for today, we're going to be playing the remake, which has pretty much everything the original does, but with the benefit of newer graphics. First and foremost, it's important to note that Panzer Dragoon is designed to be an arcade score attack game at its core, so keep that in mind as we go through the review, because some of the design decisions might seem a little bit strange at first. So with that said, let's jump into the plot of the game. Taking place in a post-apocalyptic world where we have a mix of futuristic technology and medieval fantasy, leading to a really interesting mix of styles, ending up with a very unique look. The game sees you playing as a hero named Kyle, who witnesses two dragons battle, eventually ending with the black dragon killing the rider of the blue. Before the rider of the blue dragon dies, however, he reaches out to Kyle, begging him to not let the black dragon reach the tower, and letting him know that the blue dragon knows the way. Taking the rider's last words to heart, Kyle takes it upon himself to stop the black dragon. The story itself isn't anything that I would argue is particularly amazing, and honestly it is somewhat generic, at least by a more modern standard. However, it is solid, and given the fact that the story isn't the main focus, I can live with it being on the more simple side. What the story does do is allow for the player to see all the different locations, showing off the biggest strength of the game, and that's the different environments of the 10 levels. Because what separates Panzer Dragoon from at least most other rail shooters are how stunning the environments are. The game's presentation is just on another level, even when you look at the original. It is absolutely beautiful. And the only sad thing is the fact that the action can make it pretty hard to really appreciate everything going on, but you know, first world problems. Not only are the game's visuals and its visual style an absolute joy to look at, but the game's soundtrack is absolutely incredible. Arguably one of the most underappreciated soundtracks I've ever heard. And it's not because people don't like it, but it's more like the game itself, where it's somewhat forgotten. With both full orchestral performances along with synth rock, the music does not only just serve the game to perfection, it elevates it to a whole new level, driving home the tension, the action, and the sense of adventure in a way not many games have ever managed, blending the multiple music styles like the visuals, making it an absolutely perfect combination. The only real downside is the fact that the game itself is pretty short. It's meant for multiple playthroughs, but it's beatable in roughly an hour, meaning you don't really get to enjoy these tracks for as long as you might hope. I really do suggest looking up the OST and listening to it for yourself when you have the time. As for the gameplay, this is where some might get turned off by the prospect of playing Panzer Dragoon. As mentioned, it's an on-rail shooter, meaning you don't have as many options when it comes to the core gameplay loop as you might like. Basically, you have the ability to shoot and fly around, that's about it. You don't really get to choose where you're heading, so you're going in a straight line. But at least they have a narrative reason for that, with the blue dragon knowing the way, so I can appreciate that at least. What really makes it stand out though is the fact that you effectively have 360 degrees of combat. Instead of being lazy and only having your enemies right in front of you, the game will have enemies come at you from pretty much all angles, forcing you to rotate that camera and pay attention to what's going on, making the game a lot more immersive while also getting to show off the wonderful level design. It keeps you on your toes, and it can definitely help spice up what could potentially be a somewhat boring gameplay loop. When it comes to the combat, you have two main attacks that you'll make use of, that being a single shot that you will spam like an absolute madman, or a charge shot that locks onto enemies, allowing you to defeat most lower level enemies in a single shot. I found myself relying on the charge shot for most of my kills, or at least it felt that way. It's not that the regular shot wasn't useful, it definitely was, but I like knowing that my shot was going to lock on and follow enemies that I might have missed otherwise, which is really important because you definitely want to kill as many enemies as possible, because the game tracks your enemy kill percentage. The higher percentage you get at the end of a level, the more credits or lives that you get rewarded with. And if you're playing on a harder difficulty, you're definitely going to want to make sure you have a stockpile of these. As I said, it is an arcade game at its core. What makes the game so addictive is the fact that it is a game based around skill. There doesn't seem to be any RNG really involved. If you know how to dodge, you won't get hit. It's as simple as that. It makes the game very rewarding to play. At first, I I personally struggled dodging a lot of things. However, since early enemies don't really do a lot of damage, I was able to tank through most of it. But towards the end of the game, you will probably start to die, so you gotta learn. And honestly, it felt incredible. I felt like the rider themselves actually getting better at controlling the dragon. It is way more immersive than it had any right to be. Thankfully, the game's difficulty never seems to ramp up all that much. It definitely does increase as the game goes on, but that's through the introduction of new enemy types. And thanks to their different attacks, you might get hit once or twice, but in reality, once you know what you're doing, you're probably going to cruise through most of this game. The game also has a wonderful selection of boss battles, a thing that I miss in most modern games. Though it's not gone from every game, obviously, it does feel like something that has fallen a bit to the wayside in favour of more modern game design, and I understand why. They're definitely a little dated, but man, I absolutely had a blast playing these high action and intense battles, hoping I had improved enough at the game so I didn't get absolutely destroyed, all the while taking in the game's absolutely stunning visuals. Looking for attack patterns and learning when it was my turn to attack has such a rewarding feeling, because ultimately I'm the one making the most of the game's mechanics. If I did have to criticize anything, it's basically two small things. Firstly, we versed the same boss technically multiple times throughout our playthrough. However, with this said, it's not like the fights are the same every time. It just made me wish there were more, because I really like the enemy designs and I would like to have seen just more of the game. And secondly, I would have to say the game's control definitely takes a bit of getting used to, and that's mainly down to how I played, not so much the game itself, because I played with mouse and keyboard like an absolute psychopath. If I did have to have a recommendation, I would say play this with a controller, because when I played it with a controller, it felt a lot better. But I will say it does remove a little bit of the challenge. However, you're probably not going to get as many kills since you can't aim as efficiently compared to that of a mouse, so it's a little bit of give and take, and I appreciate that. All I ask is that you do end up playing it, because it is one of the best games I've ever had the pleasure of playing. I am sad I never got to play it when it originally launched, but I would have only been 2 years old at the time, so fair enough. By the time it came back around for the original Xbox and PS2, I never knew anyone who owned a copy, and I never came across one. However, thanks to the remaster, I'm so glad I got to get around to playing this all-time classic. If you haven't had a chance yourself, I highly recommend it. And all I can do is, again, thank the fans for fighting for this game to be remade, because my god, it is incredible. Please get your hands on Panzer Dragoon and play it. It's definitely worth your time. So with that, lads, ladies, gents, ladetts, whoever, whatever, it brings us to the end of another video. I hope you enjoyed this look back at Panzer Dragoon. I haven't got to play the other games in the series, but I'm hoping to one day. It is definitely an underappreciated classic, and I cannot recommend it enough. If you enjoyed the video, please consider hitting that like button. If you want to go that extra step, you can hit the subscribe button. And if you want to go that extra mile, you can support me on Ko-fi, Patreon, or YouTube memberships like these lovely people here. And with that said, join the Discord, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe out there. Bye.